Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Sig Romeo 8T. But before we get into the video, I do need to say that if you don't know, Gun Deals is a website that provides you with links to some of the best prices and products in the industry. Whatever it is that you're looking for, you can probably find a link to it on their website for the best possible price. Now, it's important to note that they don't buy or sell anything. Again, they only point you in the right direction. So again, whatever it is that you're looking for, a link for the best possible price can probably be found on gun.deals. Now, with all of that out of the way, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and does help us out quite a bit. Also, go ahead and comment literally anything down below. Now, with all of that out of the way, full disclosure on the Sig Romeo 8T is that I paid my own money for this, 100% of my own money for this. They did not send this out for review. I have no communication and no relationship with Sig whatsoever. The only time I have ever dealt with Sig is when I thought I had killed one of my Romeo 5s. That ended up being my issue, but I have talked to their customer service one time, and that is the extent of my relationship with Sig. I have reviewed a lot of Sig's products. I tend to like their optics. I tend to not like their Generation 1 guns. But again, I did pay my own money for it, and I have had exactly zero communication to or from Sig about this review. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics on the Sig Romeo 8T. So for those of you who don't know, the 8T is basically the top of the line, the toughest, the tankiest, the most expensive red dot that Sig makes, and for good reason. The 8 lineup is their big EOTech / AMG sized optic with a 38mm window. It's a big boxy window that I really like. The glass quality is very good. And the 8T lineup, and I believe the 8 and the 4H lineup as well, those are both assembled in the USA. So you get a lot better quality control, you get a lot better QA, QC, that sort of thing. And so you have a much higher chance of receiving an optic that performs as it should, versus items that are assembled overseas. Now, getting into the size and weight on the Sig Romeo 8T, this is going to be the most controversial part for sure, and some people are going to love it, and some people are going to hate it. So this optic is nearly 4 inches long, 2.5 inches tall, and over 2 inches wide. Now, it comes in at a weight of 13.7 ounces, which I believe is the heaviest red dot on the market. I could be wrong about that. There's probably some niche old style red dot that's just a chunk of steel and aluminum that's a little bit heavier. But as far as I know of and have tested and reviewed, this is the heaviest red dot on the market. So then the question is, what are we actually getting with all of that additional size and weight? Well, the first thing that you're getting, the most obvious thing that you're getting, is a very, very large 38mm window. It is very large. It is very nice. If you like big windows and big boxy red dots, you are absolutely going to love the window size on the Romeo 8T. On top of that, you are getting a main body that is made out of 7075 T6 aluminum, which is approximately twice as strong as 6061, which most other micro style and even large style red dots are made out of. They're made out of 6061, but the Romeo 8T, the base of the optic, or the main body of the optic, is made out of 7075, which is already quite a bit stronger. On top of that, the 8T also comes with a titanium shroud that is hooked into the base of the optic, much like how EOTechs have an aluminum shroud based into the bottom of their optics. It's a very similar concept on the Romeo 8T, however, in this case, it is, of course, titanium. Now, titanium is heavier than aluminum, but on top of it being heavier, it also has a much higher strength to weight ratio. So while yes, it is slightly heavier, I believe 20 to 30% heavier, given the specific material composition, of course, but it's also far stronger, which is why in a lot of applications, it is very advantageous to have titanium versus aluminum. Now, the Romeo 8T is also powered by a single CR123A battery versus a standard 2032 battery, like a lot of other optics are powered by. The advantage of that additional size and battery is you get a rated battery life of 100,000 hours. Now, again, this is a Sig Sauer optic, which means that it has MOTAC, it's motion activation. That means that while this optic is in rest, it is completely off, meaning that 100,000 hours of battery life, let's say in real world circumstances at higher brightness levels than the medium setting, which it's rated for, let's say it's 30 to 40,000 hours of battery life, that's actually 30 to 40,000 hours of use time, not overall battery life. So the battery on the Romeo 8T will last as long as that battery can actually hold a charge, which is probably about 5 to 15 years, again, depending on the manufacturer of the battery. Now, another area where some weight is added is in the actual base of the mount itself. So we have a ginormous steel crossbolt with a hex head that is rated for 96 inch-pounds or 8 foot-pounds. Now, that is the highest torque rating on a mount that I know of in a red dot. That is higher than any other red dot that I have seen. That is higher than 99% of scope mounts on the market. And that's because they're using an incredibly strong, large, substantially sized with a 1/2 inch head crossbolt that allows you to get an insane amount of torque on your rail. Now, on top of that, it also uses a much larger than average steel locking block. That means that not only do you have that insane clamping pressure, but you get it over a much larger surface area. Now, on top of that, on the mount, not only is the crossbolt squared off, which means that it in and of itself acts like a recoil lug, you also get 2 additional recoil lugs on the bottom, which in effect creates more contact area between your optic and your upper receiver, allowing it again to have a more solid lockup during recoil with higher caliber weapons. And another side benefit of that is that it provides a more consistent return to zero, since when you push this down and push it forward, you have 3 contact surfaces that should be mating up the same every single time. So when it comes to strength versus weight in an optic design, you can tell that Sig put all 10 of their attribute points in the strength column. Now, when it comes to the titanium shroud itself, you can see that it is screwed into both sides via 3 set screws. And now remember, the optic body itself is made out of 7075, which is already a very strong material choice. And then on top of that, it has this titanium shroud. Now, the titanium shroud mostly protects the front and the rear parts of your optic, which is of course where the lenses are actually housed. And then in the middle, it has this cutout area, though it will still protect from 90% of, like, if you were dropping it on its top like 10 times, almost all of that force is going to be transferred into the base of the optic, not into the top of the housing. That of course has all of your glass and other important stuff in there that you probably don't want to be taking impacts. Not only does it protect it from the front and the sides, but it is also protrudes in front of the glass and behind the glass. So if you were slamming this into a door or a car door, a house door, something else like that, any sort of hard object, unless it was a very pointy thing that could stick through and actually poke the glass itself, it's going to be protected from just about every angle. Now, as far as ergonomics go on the optic itself, we do of course have our battery door here on the side for the side loading CR123A. You can hand tighten it, you can hand loosen it. If it gets too tight, it has little cutouts for like a edge of a case rim or something, so you could loosen it if it does become stuck or just too tight over time. Of course, me personally, throw in the highest quality battery you can and forget about it because it has that exceptional battery life. We of course have our 1/2 inch hex head, which of course also has little cutouts for it. If you don't happen to have a 1/2 inch socket on you, you can use a case rim or something else to try and get it off, because again, if you have this torque down to spec, 96 inch-pounds is an exceptional amount of force on an optic. Swapping over to the other side, we have 2 rubberized buttons. One goes up, one goes down, very simple. If you hold both of them, you will cycle through the reticle options, which we will talk about a little bit later on. I am going to critique Sig here a little bit because these buttons are not very tactile and they're very, very mushy. They are on the side, which is nice. So if you're running this with a magnifier like I was most of the time, you don't have to fiddle with the back end if you had buttons in the back. So those are really the only 2 actual controls on it. We of course have our windage and elevation in the top. The elevation one is a little bit obnoxious to get to. This is another little nitpick. So I used a screwdriver for this, but on the elevation, or sorry, on the windage, you can use the edge of a case rim or something like that. But the one on top, because it also has this plastic shroud with the flip-up caps, it's a little bit more difficult to get to. Now, you can remove both of these plastic flip-up caps. They do come built in. You can remove them if you want to, but for me personally, it kind of goes with the optic design. And in Washington, as you'll probably see in the intro and some of the other footage I'm rolling in here, not only was it snowing in the middle of April, but we were also absolutely pelted by hail. So I was using these flip caps to protect the optic and make sure that I could still see through it when I actually needed to use the optic. Flip them up and you're good to go. So now let's go ahead and talk about the reticle design and the emitter, because they kind of go hand in hand. Now, the reticle has 4 different options. The base reticle is a 2 MOA dot. and then you can do a 2 MOA dot with a 65 MOA circle, just like an EOTech. That is how I would run it most of the time. However, if you prefer a finer, more precise dot, just use the 2 MOA dot and you will be good to go. Then you also have an option for a BDC. Now, they did the BDC correctly, in my opinion. It is basically MOA holds, so the second dot is a 5 MOA drop, the third dot is a 9 MOA drop, and the fourth dot is a 15 MOA drop. Now, that is very close to, depending on your gun, ammunition is going to change, but that is very close to a 16-inch 5.56 shooting 62 grain M855. The 5 MOA drop is going to be 400 yards. The 9 MOA drop is going to be 500 yards, and the 15 MOA drop is going to be 600 yards. Those are rough estimates, and depending on your barrel length and what exact type of ammunition you're shooting, those are going to vary drastically. But because they give you the actual MOA, you can just true those out to whatever caliber that you're using. So for instance, on this 10.3 or sorry, not 10.3, this is a 10.5. This is my CQB Pro upper that I sell on Focus Shooting LLC. But on this upper receiver, 5 MOA is more like 350 yards, depending on how I zero the gun, if I zero it at 50 or 100. And then of course the 9 and the 15 are going to be like 440 and like 530 respectively, so it doesn't quite line up perfectly. But again, because you know the actual MOA holds, it is very easy to figure out where those are and then use them as reference points. If you know you need to be 15 MOA or let's say 25 MOA or 20 MOA, you can use your 15 MOA dot and then hold high, and you should be pretty darn close. Though that is a very, very long range shot with most calibers. But again, if you use all of them together, it can be busy because, of course, the fourth reticle option is all of them. So you get your 2 MOA dot, your 3 BDC holds, and then your 65 MOA outer circle. You can run it like that all of the time. It is going to use more battery than otherwise, right? Because it just has to power more of the emitter. Now, in my personal opinion, and the way that I ran the optic, is 99% of the time inside of 300 yards, I would only use the 2 MOA dot and 65 MOA outer circle. If you don't like the outer circle, get rid of it. If you want the BDC and you know you're going to be taking longer range shots, go ahead and activate that and then make a choice whether you just want the BDC or whether you also want the 65 MOA outer circle. If I knew I was going to be shooting at, say, 500 or 600 yards or anywhere really in between 300 and 500 yards, I would only have the 2 MOA dot and the BDC because I wouldn't really need the 65 MOA circle. It would just be cluttering up my screen a little bit. Now, talking about the emitter itself, it has a very, very good refresh rate. I never noticed any flickering, any fading in and out when you're transitioning very quickly and moving it right about. It has a very, very good refresh rate. On top of that, if you cycle it to just the BDC or just the 2 MOA dot, it is very crisp and very precise for a red dot emitter, which is something that I do like and something that is necessary when you're putting in a BDC. For instance, if you have a BDC with those 4 dots and they all look terrible and kind of meld together, you're not going to have a good time using those as reference points or as an actual BDC. Now, another nice thing about the emitter on the Romeo 8T is that it gets exceptionally bright. Even in snowy conditions, whiteout conditions, it will get brighter than you ever need unless you're doing missions on the surface of the sun. So the emitter, it's exceptionally bright. It's still crisp enough. It's still definitely usable. It is still, you know, dot size it, so it's not as precise as an etched reticle, but for a red dot emitter, it looks very, very good. Now, talking about the glass on the Romeo 8T for a minute, the glass quality is very good. It's a very natural looking image. There's very, very little warping. If you look at it from like a crazy weird angle, you can kind of get a tiny bit of a magnification effect, but when you're actually behind the glass, it is a perfectly flat, very, very nice image. It does have the tiniest of green-blue tint to it, but in every lighting condition that I was viewing it in, whether that was under white lights or just out on the range in shade, all sorts of different varied lighting conditions, it looked very, very good. Now, this does, of course, have night vision settings. I have not tested the night vision settings, so I cannot speak to whether or not they're good or the glass is good enough for passive aiming. I will say that the glass is very good. Not quite as good as my EOTech glass, and I would say basically on par with the AMG. The AMG does have a slight blue-green tint. Again, I'm not sure about their light transmission in like total dark passive aiming NVGs, but just for normal daytime white light shooting conditions, the glass is very, very good. Now, another thing that might just have to do with the emitter, the coatings on the lenses, and the optic design in general is that this optic has exactly zero glare in any lighting scenario that I could put it in, as opposed to a lot of cheaper holosun optics and some Sig Romeo 5s and such that will have some glare in certain circumstances, really bad glare in the case of the holosuns. But this optic has exactly zero glare in any lighting scenario that I could put it in. So with all that being said, why isn't the Sig Romeo 8 the most popular duty optic on the market? And that probably has to do with a combination of things. The first thing is that it's very expensive. The Sig Romeo 8T in the FDE version, I believe the minimum advertiser price is like $700 and the MSRP is like $900. Now that's on par with a lot of EOTechs like your EXPS3s and so on and so forth are going to be around that same price point. However, those are completely made in the USA Optics versus assembled in the USA Optics, even though I do think that this does have some advantages in terms of the mount and the titanium shroud versus an aluminum shroud. The glass quality is not quite on par with EOTech. The battery life and reticle design, in my personal opinion, especially because you can switch back and forth to whatever you want, is exceptional. The glass quality, though, not quite on the level of EOTech, so for professional passive aiming, that sort of things, it's not going to be quite as advantageous as an EOTech will for, again, about the same price. And then the last kind of contributing factor to its lack of popularity is that it is, again, the heaviest optic on the market as far as I'm aware for a red dot. So this one here, again, with the titanium shroud, comes in at 13.7 ounces. Versus 12.3 ounces, I believe, on the EOTech 558. This is the lower 1/3 with night vision and the extended battery tray. So this one here is about the heaviest EOTech on the market. And then the AMG UH1, this one here is 11.7 ounces. This one here is also about the same in terms of actual street price. The street price on the black versions I've seen for around the $600 mark, and on sale they can probably go a little bit lower than that. The tan versions usually stick at around $660 or so on the actual retail side of things. If the 8T was probably $100 to $200 cheaper and it kind of slotted underneath like EOTechs and the Vortex AMGs in terms of price, if it was actually undercutting them just a little bit, I think you would see a lot of people picking them up and trying them out, and I think that it would be much better regarded than it currently is. Now, people do really like this optic. There are a lot of people that use it that love it, and other people that kind of pass it by, as you know, because a lot of the components are made overseas. It is assembled in the US, but it's not entirely made in the US, and they're charging a very, very high price for it. Now, in my personal opinion, it definitely has the features to back it up. The only area where I would say it would be lacking is, of course, the fact that it is, one, heavier, but also that the glass quality is not quite to the level of EOTech. And again, they're around the same price. So if you're already a professional, you know, with NVGs and whatever else that you're using, you're probably just going to stick with the tried and true EOTech. Again, especially considering they're the same cost. But putting all of that off to the side for the moment, I do think the Romeo 8T is an excellent optic. I do think it's expensive, but I do think it has a lot of features to back it up. I think that if you're looking for a red dot only gun and you can take the size and weight, I think that it is an excellent option, if not one of the best options, if you don't care about size, weight, and price. Now, that's already going to make it a very niche optic, but for me personally, again, I paid my own money for this and I am very happy with its performance. Now, again, if I could get this 3 ounces lighter and $150 cheaper, I would be even happier with it, and those are going to be the main drawbacks. So, with all that out of the way, guys, I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of the Sig Romeo 8T in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.